The Diplomat, 10th of October 2023, What China-US competition means from the Israel-Palestine conflict. China is the primary financier of Hamas, using its various fronts to divert attention from the United States. It was planned during a meeting in Moscow in April between the Chinese defense minister, Iran, Russia's strategist, and Hamas. This latest round of the Israel-Palestine conflict is unlike any other since the Yom Kippur War in 1973, both in intensity and scale. The Israel-Palestine dispute will likely escalate further shortly, which might have a complex effect on a long-term resolution of the matter and adjacent and regional nations and U.S. policy in the Middle East. Opportunities and hazards are associated with the latest round of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict for China. The most recent round of hostilities between Palestine and Israel. Among the many characteristics that define the present conflict, the abruptness of the escalation has been the most noteworthy. The expansion of the civil struggle between the Palestinians and the Israelis has resulted in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict in recent years, particularly the confrontation between Israel and armed groups like Hamas in Gaza. But this conflict was not like that one. It was almost entirely unexpected and gave Israel and the world community a severe shock. An hour after hostilities began, Hamas launched 5,000 rockets into Israel, far more than the total amount fired in previous years, and Palestinian militants infiltrated southern and central Israel to conduct raids. As a result, there have been numerous casualties in Israel, with over 900 people killed and 2,700 injured as of this writing. Israel's counteroffensive will likely result in additional Palestinian deaths in Gaza as it intensifies. This episode is unique because Hamas demonstrated a great will to strike Israel with deadly weapons. Nearly all of Hamas's armaments, supplies, and soldiers were deployed during the attacks. It is fighting to the death, displaying great resolve, even though it is aware that the impending massive Israeli counterattacks and reprisal will undoubtedly weaken the organization's power. Finally, there has been substantial coordination demonstrated by Hamas and Palestine Islamic Jihad, PIJ, in Gaza. With Jihad aiming to undermine Hamas authority in Gaza, the relationship between the PIJ and Hamas has been complicated since 2018. However, Hamas and the PIJ conducted simultaneous attacks in the present military operation, demonstrating excellent coordination and a tacit understanding of the operation. In the upcoming weeks, a new phase of war between Israel and Palestine will be marked by increasing intensity, rising casualties, and challenging mediation. First, there will be future increases in the ferocity of the Israel-Palestine conflict. Israel has announced it will heavily bombard the Gaza Strip, so the Palestinian militants' resistance may become even more violent. Israel has initiated a counteroffensive to drive out the Palestinian militants who have penetrated the south. More potent bombs and strikes will unavoidably accompany Israel's attack. Increased human casualties are an inevitable consequence of the ongoing war between Israel and Palestine. On the one side, the number of Israeli casualties is over 2,000, and the death toll is getting close to 1,000. Making this the worst conflict since the State of Israel was founded in 1948. It is possible that additional Israeli dead will be discovered due to Israel's systematic purging of Palestinian militants who have infiltrated southern Israel, and the country's official death toll may continue to grow. On the other hand, the number of Palestinian casualties in Gaza is sure to rise quickly. It could surpass 10,000 due to Israel's enormous counteroffensive, particularly its airstrikes on the heavily populated area. Finally, it will be challenging to establish a ceasefire shortly if the Israel-Palestine conflict erupts again. Israel's army and government are under intense public pressure following such high casualties. To preserve domestic public opinion, the Israeli army and administration must mount a counteroffensive to deal a severe blow to Hamas and the PIJ. In that regard, Israel has categorically rejected Egypt's offer to mediate as the customary go-between for Israel and Hamas in Gaza. Realizing a ceasefire between Israel and Hamas would be challenging until Israeli public opinion feels that the militant organization has been punished satisfactorily. Potential courses of additional conflict. Escalation could be a potential problem on a global scale. Geographically speaking, there is a chance of a north-south clash. The armed forces of Hezbollah in southern Lebanon expressed their support for Palestinian armed factions following the start of the conflict between Israel and Hamas. Hezbollah and Israel engaged in a few stray gunfire exchanges. Israel and Iran were exchanging gunfire at the same time in southern Syria. Iran-backed Shia armed groups in South Syria might also align themselves with Hamas and the PIJ and engage in hostilities with Israel. The other potential is conflict between Israel, which supports Hamas and the PIJ, and the Shia armed organizations in southern Syria that receive Iranian backing. However, there's a chance that the Israeli-Iranian confrontation will spread throughout the region. It is impossible to completely rule out the prospect of a significant war between Iran and Israel involving Iranian paramilitary groups such as Hezbollah in Lebanon, the Popular Mobilization Militias, PMF, in Syria, the Fatima Brigades, and other Shiite militias with close ties to Iran. Whether or not there is another round of Israeli-Palestinian violence in the West Bank will determine how many other disputes arise in the future. After 2021, more autonomous armed groups not connected to Hamas or Fatah, the main Palestinian faction, began to appear in the West Bank's Nablus and Jenin. The more politicized the Jewish settlers have grown, the stronger their attitude toward Israel, mainly the Jewish settlers. The intensity and scope of the conflict will undoubtedly increase, and armed groups in Lebanon and Syria will be encouraged to launch attacks on Israel if the Palestinian population in the West Bank, particularly the armed elements, are motivated to launch large-scale attacks on Israel and Jewish settlements in the future by the conflict in Gaza and Israel. Effects on China, Iran, and Russia, the conflict's sponsors, as well as the United States. This round of the Israel-Palestine conflict will significantly impact future regional and global conditions. First, there has been a blow to the Israeli Netanyahu government's reputation. The Israeli public's perception of Benjamin Netanyahu's right-wing government has been badly damaged by its inability to stop the attacks. Netanyahu's Mr. Security political persona will become less appealing in Israel. Second, there is now a restored relationship between the US and Israel. The US Biden administration and Israel's Netanyahu government had chilly ties before the start of the conflict. While attending the recent UN General Assembly in the United States, Netanyahu was not invited to visit the White House. However, when the crisis broke out, Biden dispatched a fleet to Israel and contacted Netanyahu to offer assistance. The United States will undoubtedly provide Israel with more material aid. Even after the fight, the United States and Israel are expected to continue their security and defense cooperation. Third, achieving the United States' goal of normalizing relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia will be challenging. Since 2018, the United States has pressured Saudi Arabia and Israel to restore diplomatic ties. This is part of a larger plan to encourage Arab nations to normalize relations with Israel to alter the Middle East's geopolitical landscape, isolate Iran, and keep China in check. However, the normalization of Saudi Arabia-Israeli relations will unavoidably be suspended during the current round of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. A breakthrough is hard to achieve in the near run. Fourth, as China requested, the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC, which the United States supports, will be momentarily blocked. IMEC, an alternate transit route connecting India with Europe, was established by the United States during the G20 meeting in New Delhi, bringing together Saudi Arabia, Israel, the United Arab Emirates, India, and the European Union. Already, observers have questioned Saudi Arabia's and Israel's willingness to collaborate so openly on the route. The concept for the India-Middle East-Europe economic corridor is likely to encounter additional challenges throughout its execution, given the current challenges to the rehabilitation of relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. China sees both advantages and disadvantages in the Israel-Palestine issue. One way or another, the relationship between China and Israel will suffer in the short run. However, China's primary goal is to split up U.S. forces. Israel had hoped for China's consolation and sorrow upon the start of the conflict, but in Israel's opinion, China's stance lacked compassion. Simultaneously, many posts on Chinese social media have been made, many of which have been translated by the Israeli domestic media and have soured public sentiment in Israel regarding China. These posts have expressed sympathy for Hamas. This may impact future policies and attitudes of Israel toward China. However, China may gain from the fact that the ongoing Israeli-Palestinian conflict has thwarted the U.S.'s attempts to unite Arab nations. The gulf over the Israeli-Palestinian issue between Arab countries and the West has been made clear by the latest round of fighting. While the Arab world feels sympathy for Palestine, the West supports Israel. The United States' unwavering backing for Israel through its policies and attitude will inevitably sour relations with Arab nations shortly.